Brambly Hedge. Spring Story by Jill Barklem. It was the most beautiful morning. The spring sunshine crept into every cottage along Brambly Hedge, and the little windows in the trees were opened wide. A few of the mice who lived there were up early, but the earliest of all was little Wilfred Toadflax, who lived with his family in the hornbeam tree. It was Wilfred's birthday, and he was excited, very excited indeed. Jumping out of bed, he ran into his parents' room. They were fast asleep. They did look comfortable. But Wilfred was so excited he didn't notice that, and jumped upon their bed and bounced up and down until they woke up.
Who is it? What's happening?
Why are we bouncing up and down like this? Oh, what's going on?
It's me, Wilfred. It's my birthday.
Oh.
Can I have my presents, please?
Oh, it's you, Wilfred. Happy birthday to you.
Yes, happy birthday, dear.
Thank you very much. Can I have my presents now, please?
Eh? Oh, yes, of course, dear. They're over there in the corner.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday, Wilfred.
Yes, happy birthday, Wilfred.
And they both went back to sleep. Wilfred tore off the pretty wrappings on the boxes and scattered them all over the floor. Then he looked at his presents.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Oh, a catapult. Oh, a drum. A little brown donkey on wheels. Oh, a pea shooter. Oh, and a new ball. Oh, and what's this? Oh, it's a whistle. I've always wanted one like this. Now I'll be able to play proper tunes. Oh, I do like my presents, I really do.
Wilfred's excitement woke up his brothers and sisters, who poked their heads round the door.
Happy birthday, Wilfred. You're up early.
Yes, happy birthday, Wilfred.
Oh, thank you.
Now we're going back to sleep.
Oh, everybody seems to want to go back to sleep. I suppose it is a bit early. I know. I'll go out on the stairs and try out my new whistle.
The sound of Wilfred's whistle floated through the clear air into the bedroom window next door where Mr. and Mrs. Apple lived in Crabapple Cottage. Mrs. Apple got out of bed and stretched.
Ah, my. The air smells very sweet this nice spring morning. I think I'll go down to the kitchen, get the breakfast, and make a nice pot of elderflower tea. I'll give you a call when it's ready.
Right you are, dear. Thank you.
Mr. Apple was a nice old-fashioned mouse who was warden of the store stump where all the food for Brambly Hedge was kept. And his wife, Mrs. Apple, was a very kindly mouse and a wonderful cook. The cottage always smelled of newly baked bread, fresh cakes and blackberry puddings. She went down and bustled around in the kitchen for a while.
Well, that's the toast done. Now then, jam, butter, tea. Well, I think that's everything. Breakfast's ready.
Coming! My word, that looks inviting. And that's my favourite strawberry jam, unless I'm much mistaken.
Tea, dear?
Please. Very good breakfast, dear. Very good indeed. What's that warbling, whistling sound? Listen. Can you hear something?
I thought I heard something earlier when I woke up.
I think someone needs a lesson from the blackbirds, don't you?
Yes, I do, rather.
Well, as it's such a beautiful morning, I think I'll just brush my whiskers and go down to the store stump. I've got quite a few things to check today. I'll see you later, dear. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
The store stump was almost next door to Crabapple Cottage, just a little way down the hedge, and was surrounded by brambles and violets. As Mr. Apple walked happily through the grass to the big wooden front doors, he felt someone pull his tail. He turned round quickly.
Who's that pulling my Oh, it's you, Wilfred.
Good morning, Mr. Apple.
You're up bright and early this morning, aren't you?
Yes, it's my birthday.
Oh, is it, young mouse? Well, a very happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Mr. Apple. Have you seen my new whistle?
No, but I think I may have heard it this morning, rather early. Now, Wilfred, as it's your birthday, would you like to come and help me check the store stump? We might find something there for you.
Oh, yes, please, Mr. Apple. Thank you.
Come along, then. Young birthday mouse, follow me. Just around this ground ivy. Past the daisies. And here we are. Come in, Wilfred, and follow me.
Oh, it does smell good in here, Mr. Apple.
Just keep close to me and don't touch anything, young mouse.
Don't you ever get lost in here with all these passages and staircases? Where do they all go?
They lead to the storerooms. There are dozens of them, all full of nuts and honey and jams and pickles and, well, all the things we need here in Brambly Hedge. And each one has to be inspected. Come along, young birthday mouse, and you can help me.
By the time they had finished inspecting all the different stores, Wilfred felt so tired he had to sit on the chair beside the hall fireplace to have a rest.
Phew, I'm tired out, Mr. Apple.
Yes, you do look a bit weary.
I expect it's going up and down all those stairs.
Yes, I expect it is. Well, I think I might find something to put that right.
Mr. Apple climbed up a ladder to the third shelf and lifted down a jar of sugared violets. Then he made a little cornet from a twist of paper, filled it with sweets, and gave it to Wilfred.
Here you are, Wilfred. These should do the trick.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Apple. Sugared violets are my favourite sweets.
Good. Then they're a real birthday treat. Now give me your paw and I'll lead you back to the front door. Come along. There we are, then.
Thank you, Mr. Apple. I love visiting the store stump. Thank you for the sugared violets.
Wilfred, blinking in the dazzling spring sunshine, ran off to look for his brothers and sisters. Mr. Apple watched him till he was out of sight, then gave a little chuckle and hurried off to visit his daughter Daisy and her husband Lord Woodmouse, who lived in the old oak palace in the middle of the hedge. From the outside, the palace looked like an ordinary oak tree, but inside, the trunk was hollowed out to form a beautiful and many-roomed mansion. At its heart was the grand ballroom. Polished doors led to magnificent kitchens, dining rooms, bedrooms and playrooms. Old Oak Palace had always been the home of the Woodmouse family. Upstairs in the best bedroom, Lord and Lady Woodmouse woke to bright sunshine. The golden sunbeams shone through the lattice windows, lighting up the pretty room with its patchwork quilts, family portraits and masses of fresh and dried flowers. Lady Daisy sat up in her four-poster and drew back the silken curtains.
Oh, what a perfect day! And breakfast has been brought up for us too. Tea, toast and primrose biscuits.
That looks good. I'll pour the tea while you butter the toast.
After breakfast, they heard that Daisy's father had come to call, and she and Lord Woodmouse were soon up and dressed and running down the stairs to greet him. They found him in the kitchen, drinking mint tea with Mrs. Crustybread, the palace cook.
Hello, Papa.
Good morning, Mr. Apple. Good morning, both of you.
What brings you here so early, Papa?
Well, I met little Wilfred. In fact, I took him to the store stump for a while. I don't know if you know, but it's his birthday today, and I thought it would be nice if we arranged a surprise picnic for him. Wonderful idea. Splendid. Don't you agree, Daisy?
Oh, yes, of course I do. What do you think, Mrs. Crustybread?
Lovely thought, lovely. And I'll make a special birthday cake if his mother agrees. In fact, I'll pop into the pantry now
and check that I've got all the ingredients.
We must invite everybody in Brambly Hedge, of course.
Oh, yes. Must do that. I know. You set off up the hedge towards the woods and tell everybody who lives in that direction, Mr. Apple. And I'll go down and call at all the houses on the way to the stream. Good idea. See you later.
So they set off. The first house on Mr. Apple's route was Elderbury Lodge. This fine elder bush was Basil's home. Basil was in charge of the store stump cellars and was a bit absent-minded. He had long white whiskers and always wore a scarlet waistcoat. He used to keep the other mice amused for hours with his stories and eccentric ways. He was just getting up and rubbing the sleep out of his eyes.
A picnic, eh? Splendid idea. I'll bring up some rose-petal wine. Let's see if I can find me trousers. Now, where's me trousers? Where did I put them? Ah, there you are, you rascals hiding behind the sofa. Yes, I'll bring up some rose-petal wine, don't you worry.
Next, Mr. Apple went to Hornbeam Cottage, where Mr. Toadflax was sitting on his front doorstep, eating bread and bramble jelly.
Morning, Mr. Toadflax. Is your Wilfred about?
Yes, he's playing with his brother and sisters somewhere. It's his birthday today, you know.
That's why I came to see you. We all thought it would be a nice idea to have a surprise picnic for him.
Oh, yes. What a good idea. He'd like that.
He'll know we're preparing an outing, of course, but we won't tell him what the picnic's for. Everyone is to meet at midday by the palace roots.
Right you are. Right you are. I'll go in and tell Mrs. Toadflax.
Good. I'll just pop on down to the tussock and tell old Vole about it.
Lord Woodmouse, meanwhile, was working his way down to the stream, but the news had travelled ahead of him. And all along the hedge, excited mice leaned out of their windows.
Where should we meet for our picnic? I can't wait. So exciting. Come along, let's get ready.
I'll see if I can find some preserves.
Thank you, Mrs. Eyebright.
Shall we bring some nettle stem tablecloths?
Yes, please, weavers. That would be most helpful.
Take some apples.
Lord Woodmouse went on to the dairy, where Poppy Eyebright promised cheeses, and then to the mill, where Dusty Dogwood, the miller, offered a batch of buns. Soon, Mr. Apple was kept very busy with mice calling at the store stump to collect clover flower and honey, bramble brandy and poppy seeds, and all the other good things needed for the picnic. Mrs. Crustybread baked a huge hazelnut cake with layers of thick cream, and Wilfred's mother decorated it and placed a pink candle in the centre. Mrs. Apple made some of her very special primrose puddings. With all this going on, Wilfred knew there was to be an outing and was pretty certain that if he behaved, he would be allowed to go. He did his best. But well, with a new whistle, a drum and a pea shooter, it wasn't very easy. When Wilfred and the Toadflax family arrived at the palace, all the mice who lived in Brambly Hedge were busy packing the food and drinks into hampers, baskets, wheelbarrows and bags and carts. Everyone seemed to have something to push or pull or carry. Wilfred was given an enormous basket.
This is heavy. I can hardly lift it.
Here, Wilfred. Put it in the wheelbarrow. Your brother and sisters will help you push it.
Yes, we'll help you, Wilfred. Come on, Wilfred, push. I'll pull from the front.
Off we go, everyone.
Nobody seems to know it's my birthday. I even hope I might get some more presents. Instead, I'm pushing this horrid heavy wheelbarrow.
Pushing. Come on, Wilfred.
Mind the big stone.
They all made their way round the palace, through the cornfield and up by the stream. At last, Lord Woodmouse held up his paw.
Here we are, everybody. We've arrived.
Thank goodness for that. Oh, I'm tired.
Right. Weavers, if you lay the tablecloths on the grass, the rest of us can unpack the baskets. Basil, can you get up the wine, please? And Mrs. Apple, perhaps you'd be kind enough to bring...
There were blackberry puddings, honey cakes, freshly made bread, jam tartlets, blancmanges, bilberry jellies, and many other delicious things. Wilfred was so exhausted, he sat on his basket, too tired to open it, his whiskers drooping sadly.
Quiet, please, everybody. I will say grace. For this good food from our green fields, may we be very thankful.
Wilfred? I think the knives are all in your basket, dear. If you get them out, we can cut the pies.
All right.
Slowly, Wilfred slipped down from his perch on top of his basket, undid the catch, and lifted the lid.
Oh!
Didn't know anything about that, did he? No.
He could hardly believe his eyes. Inside the hamper, packed all round with presents, was an enormous cake, and on the top, written in pink icing, were the words, "Happy Birthday, Wilfred."
Oh, thank you very much, everybody. I thought that you'd all forgotten my birthday.
No, we'd never do that, Wilfred, would we, everybody?
No.
Of course we would. Don't be silly. How can we forget your birthday? Now, Wilfred, we all want to watch you open your presents.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Oh, look. I've got a set of 9 pins. Oh, a toy rabbit. Oh, and a whole jar of sugared violets. Oh, a jack-in-the-box. A little wooden mouse. And a huge conker on a string. Oh, I am lucky.
Which is your favourite present?
I like all of them, Catkin. Oh, but the best present is that you all remembered my birthday. Oh, and the second best is, I think, my whistle.
I'm not too sure I would have agreed with you when I heard you playing it first thing this morning, Wilfred.
I've been practicing since then, Mr. Apple. I can play it better now.
In that case, I think you should give us a tune.
Yes,
Come on, Wilfred, play us something. Yeah, come on. Now, who would like a quick top-up before Wilfred starts? Some rose petal wine, anyone? A spot of cordial for you, Lady Woodmouse?
Then Wilfred, feeling rather bashful, stood up and took out his whistle.
Ladies and gentlemen, mice, we will now play for you Hickory Dickory Dandelion Clock.
When he had finished, the mice all clapped their paws, and Wilfred bowed and sat down. Mrs. Toadflax nudged him meaningfully.
Wilfred, don't forget to say what you should say.
Oh, no. Thank you all very much indeed for, all my lovely presents. Oh, and Mrs. Crustybread, I'm sorry that I fired acorns through your kitchen window this morning.
Oh, that's all right, dear. No harm done.
Now, everybody, time for tea.
Oh, that looks delicious.
Mrs. Crustybread.
There was a bustling and a rustling as the mice sat down on the grass. There was a clattering and chattering as they all ate the delicious food laid out for them. And then Wilfred went round handing out slices of his birthday cake.
Happy birthday to you, Wilfred.
Yes, happy birthday. And this cake is delicious.
Thank you very much. Can I have a piece?
When tea was over, and all the crumbs were gathered up and put aside for the blackbirds, and the dishes were collected ready to be taken home, the grown-ups settled down under the bluebells for a long, lazy snooze in the warm spring sunshine, while the young mice played hide-and-seek in the primroses. At last, the sun began to sink behind the far woods, and a chilly breeze blew over the field. It was time to go home.
Come along, dear.
Time to go home.
You look sleepy. What a wonderful week.
When the moon came up that night, Brambly Hedge was silent and still. Every mouse was fast asleep. Even Wilfred. Brambly Hedge, Summer Story by Jill Barklem. It was a very hot summer. Even old Vole said it was the hottest summer he could remember. Each day the sun rose high in the blue sky, and the fields shimmered in the heat. All the little windows in the trees along Brambly Hedge were opened wide. Many of the mice stayed inside their shady cottages trying to keep cool. The hedgerow was still and quiet. Out of doors, the best place to be was down by the stream. The mice gathered there in the afternoons, sat under the bank in the shade of the waterside plants and flowers, and dangled their paws and tails in the fresh, clear water.
You, that's cooler. If you keep your tail cool, you'll be cool all over.
Shh, don't wake Basil.
On the banks of the stream were the flour mill and the dairy mill. A flow of water turned the wheels which ground the flour and churned the butter for Brambly Hedge. Poppy Eyebright looked after the dairy stump.
Oh, it is difficult working in this hot weather. I don't like it at all. Nor do I, Poppy. Not me, Poppy.
Nor me.
I'm hot too, Poppy. So am I.
I'd like a cold drink. Oh,
Poppy had several Brambly Hedge mice helping her run the dairy stump. She supervised the large vat into which milk, given by some friendly cows, was poured and stored. She was also in charge of the many kitchens, where the cheeses were drained and shaped and smoked and wrapped. But the hot weather made the work difficult.
Oh dear, the butter is beginning to melt. Quick, bring some dock leaves and wrap them round the butter pats. That should keep them cool. Right you are, Poppy. At once, Poppy.
here they are, Poppy.
Poppy, I think this cream's going off. Oh no! All right, everybody, take a cream pot and come with me. We'll hang them in the mill pool and keep them fresh that way. We're coming, Poppy. Good idea, Poppy.
Wouldn't mind a dip myself.
There. Oh, that should keep them cool until we need them. Now, when all the butter pats are wrapped up, I think we'll finish. That's enough for such a hot day.
Oh, good. Are you going for your usual walk by the mill pool when we finish, Poppy?
Yes, I think we could all do with some fresh air.
The flour mill further down the stream was run by the miller Dusty Dogwood. Dogwood was his family name, but he was called Dusty because he was always covered from tail to whiskers with flour dust. He was a cheerful and friendly mouse like his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, who had all run the mill before him. He loved the fine weather and strolled up and down the stream, chatting to the paddlers and dabblers. His walks took him past the dairy, where he would often see Poppy standing by the stream, looking very pretty. As the long hot days went by, Dusty used to spend more and more time walking up to the dairy, and Poppy used to go out more and more often to the mossy shadows of the mill wheel. Then one day, early in June, all the mice who lived in Brambly Hedge received a notice asking them to go to the store stump at tea time. When all the mice were gathered, Mr. Apple, who was in charge of the store stump, held up a paw for silence.
My good friends! My good friends! Mr. Dusty Dogwood and Miss Poppy Eyebright have an important announcement to make. Mr. Dusty Dogwood.
Good old Dusty.
Ladies and gentlemen, mice, it is with great pleasure that I have to announce the forthcoming. Well, to announce that I and we.
Get on with it, Dusty.
Yes. Well, to announce that Miss Poppy Eyebright and me are soon. Well, in fact, are now.
Engaged to be married.
Yes. Thank you, Poppy.
Dusty.
And when is the happy day to be, Dusty? Midsummer's Day. We thought would be a good time, didn't we, Poppy?
We have decided to hold the wedding on the stream.
You mean by the stream?
No, on the stream. It's the coolest place. And besides, it's very romantic. Of course, you are all invited.
Oh, yes! That's fantastic! I love it. You see, everybody, I've found a large flat piece of bark up in the woods. It would make a perfect raft. Now, if some of you will help to bring it down to the water's edge, we could sort of launch it.
Yeah, come and give us a hand. Soon the bark was floated, with some difficulty, just under the mill weir. Eventually, it was tethered in midstream by plaited rushes and nettle ropes. Meanwhile, Poppy prepared her trousseau. Every afternoon, she sat in the shade of some tall kingcups, embroidering her wedding dress, which she hid as soon as she saw anyone coming along the path.
Midsummer's Day already. Will we ever be ready, do you think? Where should I put this cold watercress soup on the table? Thank you, Mrs. Apple.
I've got the meringues here.
Oh, just pop them out of the way for now. I'll see to them in a minute.
Doesn't the cake look wonderful?
I finished the dandelion salad. Hot the syllabubs with the pie, please. Oh, don't touch, Wilfred.
The young mice had been up early to gather huge baskets of wild strawberries, and over at the store stump cellars, Basil was sorting out the wine. Basil was a stout, good-natured mouse with a sensitive nose for fine wine.
Let me see. White, I think. Some Primrose. A few bottles of elderflower. Oh, yes, and a goodly supply of meadowsweet. That should go well with this hot weather. I've just put them to cool in the stream by the rushes.
Meanwhile, in her rooms above the dairy, Poppy was dressing carefully.
Now, a little touch of polish on my whiskers. A small dab of rose water behind the ear. That's right. And now, where's my straw bonnet? Oh, it was so kind of Lady Woodmouse to trim it with flowers for me. Where... Oh, here it is on the bedpost. Oh, it does look pretty. And there's my bridal posy on the windowsill. A last check up in the mirror. And, now, down to see my bridesmaids.
While this was going on, Dusty took his best suit out of the basket where he kept it to protect it from moths, put it on, and tucked a daisy in his buttonhole. Then a worried look came over his face.
Oh dear, I'm sure I've forgotten to do something. Now, what was it? I think I'd better run upstairs and check on that barley I ground yesterday.
Dusty ran up so fast that the whole mill seemed to shake, and the wooden floor above let down a big cloud of flour dust all over his new wedding suit.
Oh, bother it. Oh, bother it. All over my jacket. Oh, what am I going to do? I'm covered in flour. Absolutely covered. Who's that?
It's me, Conker. Are you ready, Dusty? It's nearly time to go.
Wait a minute. I'll come down and let you in. Hello, Conker.
Hello, Dusty by name, Dusty by nature. What have you been up to?
I just went upstairs to check on some barley and this happened. What shall I do?
Stand still. Let me at it with my handkerchief. I'll try and dust you off.
Steady? It's getting worse. Oh, the dust is swirling everywhere.
What did you say?
I said it's getting worse. The dust is flying all over the place. Now it's all over you too. Your whiskers have gone white and your buttonhole was red when you came in. It's white now.
You've got a white tail.
And so have you. You look like a snowman.
Your green jacket's gone white like mine, and you should see your nose. Oh, it's too funny. I'll have to sit down a minute. Oh.
No, don't sit on that. It's a sack of flour. Oh, too late. Now your trousers are all white.
The wedding was to take place at midday. The guests were in their finest clothes, and 3 young mice, dressed in smart blue suits, had been chosen as pages and were busily directing everyone to their places on the raft, which was decked out in pink and white bunting, draped from poles decorated with wild flowers. Under a large awning at one end, all the various delicacies were set out surrounding a mouth-watering 3-tier iced wedding cake. Dusty and Conker arrived just in time, and the first person to see them was Mrs. Apple.
Oh, there you are. My goodness, are you all right? You both look so pale. And why are you both wearing white suits?
We're not wearing white suits.
It's Dusty's fault. If he had...
No, it's not my fault. It was Conker. He started to... Oh, bless you.
Flower!
Yeah.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. I'll dust you down, both of you. There. That's the best I can do. Quick now, get to your places, both of you.
Every head turned to watch the bride as she made her way through the buttercups and stepped onto the decorated raft to where the old Vole, who had been asked to perform the ceremony, was waiting. He tapped his walking stick on the raft floor.
Dearly friends, we are gathered here to share in the marriage of Poppy Eyebright to Dusty Dogwood.
Yes, it's great, isn't it?
Poppy Eyebright, do you love Dusty Dogwood? And will you love him and care for him forever and ever?
Yes, I will.
Dusty Dogwood, do you love Poppy? And will you love her and look after her forever and ever?
I will.
Then, in the name of the flowers and the fields, the stars in the sky and the streams that flow down to the sea, and the mystery that breathes wonder into all these things, I pronounce you mouse and wife.
Then Dusty kissed the bride and the bridesmaids. Some of the mice threw baskets of petals over the happy couple. Mrs. Apple blew her nose and wiped a tear from her eye, and the dancing and feasting began. First they danced because no one could keep still. After the first jig, Mr. Apple raised his paws in the air.
Ladies and gentlemice, I would like to propose a toast to the bride and groom. May their tails grow long and their eyes be bright, and all their squeaks be little ones.
To the bride and groom!
The dancing became so vigorous that the raft bobbed up and down. Gradually, the ropes holding it began to wear through. One by one, the little ropes snapped. Until finally, the last one gave way, and the raft was carried into midstream by the current.
Oh, look, we're drifting! Oh, will we be all right? We're going downstream!
Will we be all right, Mr. Apple?
Yes, perfectly all right. Don't you worry. We'll drift with the current. We shan't come to any harm, I promise you.
And the raft floated gently down the stream, past fields of buttercups and meadowsweet. The voles tending the fires in the pottery came out to wave as the wedding party drifted by.
Thank you, everybody. And now, let the feasting begin.
This should be...
Mrs. Apple cut the pies and served up the salads, and all the mice helped themselves. Basil poured the wine, and the children handed round baskets of strawberries and dishes of meringues. It was a magnificent feast. Then, just as Poppy and Dusty were about to cut the cake...
Now, everybody, while we've been eating, the raft has drifted to the bank.
So it has. That is excellent. Absolutely excellent. I knew we'd be fine. What do you say, old Vole?
Oh, yes. Excellent. Excellent.
We can tie up here. Throw the ropes over and make fast to those rushes and forget-me-nots.
Quick, throw it. There we are. Tied up, safe and sound again. Now, what about that cake?
Oh, yes.
Then I think some more dancing.
Oh, yes. It's been a beautiful wedding, hasn't it, everyone? Oh, yes, lovely.
At last, the dusk came, golden and misty over the fields. The blue sky slowly darkened, and the mice began to think about getting home.
We've eaten all the food, and we've danced and enjoyed ourselves, and now I'm beginning to feel tired. What about you, old Vole? Right, everyone. Put the pots and pans in the rushes for now. We'll collect them tomorrow. Have you had a happy day, Poppy and Dusty?
Oh,
yes, thank you. Wonderful.
And the dancing has shaken every last speck of flour from you, Dusty. You look a much better colour now.
Yes, I've heard of a bridegroom putting a flower in his buttonhole, but I've never heard of one like Dusty putting flour all over himself.
Ooh, time to go. Conker, will you take old Vole back to his burrow on your way home?
Of course. Come on, sir.
And so, exhausted but happy, the Brambly Hedge mice walked back through the fields in the evening sun, looking very splendid in their wedding clothes. And what happened to Poppy and Dusty? They slipped quietly away to the primrose woods. The primroses were over, but there, hidden among the long grass and ferns, wild roses and honeysuckle, was the cottage in which they had chosen to stay. It was the perfect place for a honeymoon. Brambly Hedge, Autumn Story by Jill Barklem. It was a fine autumn. The blackberries were ripe and the nuts were ready, and the mice of Brambly Hedge were very busy. Every morning they went out into the fields to gather seeds, berries and roots, which they took back to the store stump. There, Mr. Apple, whose job it was to look after the store stump, was directing everyone as they carefully stowed the autumn harvest away for the winter ahead.
Thank you, Dusty. Just put them over there. That's a nice collection of poppy seed, Mrs. Crustybread. Thank you. Over there, please, Conker. Well done, Wilfred. I'll take those. Good.
The store stump was warm inside and smelled deliciously of bramble jelly and rising bread, and it was nearly full of food. Lord Woodmouse, who lived in the old oak palace, was out early with his youngest daughter, Primrose. They were making their way along the blackberry bushes.
Now, keep close to me, Primrose, and don't get lost. You know what a dreadful tangle these bushes can be.
Yes, Papa.
And try not to catch your dress on those thorns.
Yes, Papa.
Now, you pick the berries nearest the ground, and I'll hook the upper branches down with my walking stick.
Yes, Papa.
The basket was nearly full when they were joined by old Mrs. Eyebright. She was wearing her hat with the jay feather in it, and she looked rather worried. Primrose saw her first.
Hello, Mrs. Eyebright.
Oh, hello, Primrose, my dear.
Good day, Mrs. Eyebright. And how are you this morning?
Oh, hello, Lord Woodmouse. Not so good, you know. I've been looking for you. I'm getting worried. Very worried indeed.
Oh, dear. Why is that, Mrs. Eyebright?
Bad weather's on its way. I can feel it in my bones. We must finish the harvest before the rain begins. Yes, I can feel it in my bones. I can, in all my bones.
You are usually right about such things, Mrs. Eyebright.
And I noticed the rooks were flying low over the field.
Don't know about that, my dear, but I can feel it in my bones. In my bones, I can.
We'd better do something about it at once. Primrose, you go back to the palace. I must go along to the store stump and see Mr. Apple. We'll have to make some urgent arrangements. Good day, Mrs. Eyebright, and thank you for the warning.
No trouble. No trouble. My bones are seldom wrong.
Soon parties of mice with carts and wheelbarrows were hurrying out to the fields to gather the last of the nuts and berries. Lord Woodmouse, after his talk with Mr. Apple, went back to the palace, and he and Lady Woodmouse decided to help by going out to pick some mushrooms. They were just setting off when Lady Woodmouse stopped suddenly.
Where's Primrose?
How do you mean, dear? Isn't she here?
No, I thought she was with you.
She was. But I told her to come back here to the palace. Didn't you see her?
No, she's not here. She didn't come back here.
She must be around somewhere.
Primrose! Primrose!
Primrose!
Primrose!
Perhaps she's hiding in one of the baskets.
But she wasn't. And she wasn't under the leaves or in the long grass either. Lord Woodmouse looked round anxiously.
There's a lot of mice gathering berries high up in that blackthorn bush. They'll have a good view from there. I'll ask them if they've seen her.
Oh, yes, but you'll have to call loud.
Have you seen Primrose anywhere?
What did you say? What's that?
Have you seen Primrose anywhere about?
Oh,
Primrose! Ah, Primrose!
oh, Primrose! No, we haven't seen her.
Oh, dear. Where can she be, I wonder?
Let's ask those mice up in the tangly hawthorn tree if they've seen her.
Oh, I do hope they have.
That looks like young Wilfred up there with them. He might have seen her.
Wilfred! Have you seen Primrose anywhere about?
Not recently, no. Why?
We think she's lost.
Perhaps she's gone over to her grandmother's house. Do you want us to go and see if she's there?
Yes, please, Wilfred. Run quickly. We're getting really worried.
So Wilfred and the other mice hurried down from the hawthorn tree and ran as quickly as they could over to Crabapple Cottage. They knocked on the front door.
Hello, Wilfred. What are you doing over here? I thought you were collecting berries up in the blackthorn bush.
I was, Mrs. Apple, but we're looking for Primrose. Have you seen her anywhere?
No, Wilfred, not today. Why?
She's vanished into thin air. Lord and Lady Woodmouse think she's lost.
Oh, no. Oh, dear. Well, just let me take off my apron and I'll help you look for her. Oh, how very worrying.
Then Mr. Apple, who had been told what was happening, ran over to the gap in the hedge by the store stump and joined in the search. Soon all the mice were out looking for her, and the calls echoed across the cornfield.
Primrose!
Lord and Lady Woodmouse went back to the palace and searched everywhere. In the cupboards, under the beds, below the stairs, in the attic, everywhere. And the store stump too was searched from top to bottom, but she was nowhere to be found.
Oh, dear. She's such a little mouse. Where can she be? What shall we do?
Now, while all this was going on, Primrose was wandering along the edge of the cornfield, quite unaware of her parents' concern. She had spent the morning picking wild flowers and gazing up at the blue sky, and after a lunch of blackberries, had dozed a little in the sun. She was just going to help a group of mice she had seen gathering seeds in the ditch, when she spotted a little round house high up in the stalks of the corn.
I've never noticed that little house before. I wonder who lives up there. I know. I'll climb up and peek through one of the windows and see what's inside. Up I go. Nearly there. There. I can just reach the window. Oh, I do beg your pardon. I didn't think that anyone... Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to... I'll climb down straight away.
Don't worry, dear. You needn't go. We were just going to have tea, weren't we, my dear?
Yes, indeed. I've just laid the table. Won't you join us?
Yes, please do. My wife has just baked a beautiful hazelnut cake.
And there's fresh honey.
And clover bread.
And some biscuits.
And jam tarts.
And blackberry juice.
That's very kind of you. If you really don't mind, I am a little hungry.
Well, that's splendid. Come along in.
I'll fetch the little stool.
So Primrose found the tiny front door and went inside. It was very cosy. There was a thistledown carpet on the floor, and the neatly woven grass walls were covered with books and pictures.
What a lovely little house. It's so small and neat, and I like the way it bobs about as the corn waves in the breeze.
So glad you like it. And it's so nice to see you. We don't have many visitors, do we, my dear?
Indeed, no. It's not often that folk from the hedge venture up here by the cornfield. Now, you sit down here between us, dear, and I'll cut you a nice piece of my hazelnut cake.
Thank you.
Would you like to look at our album of family pictures while you're having your tea?
Yes, please.
Here you are. I'll just move that cake along a little. Now, this is a picture of our cousin and all her grandchildren. 22, I think.
At last count. And that is our second cousin. He lives a long way away, beyond the far woods.
And this is our uncle.
When Primrose had been shown all their treasures and eaten her tea, she thanked the harvest mice politely, left the little house and climbed down to the ground again. She decided to walk to the edge of the chestnut woods before she went home. Some Brambly Hedge mice were still there picking blackberries, but they were too busy to notice her. She peered into the grasses looking for feathers and other useful things. Then suddenly, she discovered something very interesting.
Oh, a hole hidden away in the brambles. I wonder if anyone lives down there. Hello? Hello? Is anybody there? Perhaps I'll go inside just a little way. Hello? Is there anybody there? That's funny. Hello? Just a bit further. Hello? Perhaps a few steps more won't hurt. It's very dark in here, and what a lot of passages. I can just see now. What are they? They seem to be front doors set in the walls. Strange. I'll just go down this passage a bit and see where it leads to. It's getting darker and darker. Oh, I don't think I like this place. I'm going home. But oh dear, which way do I go? With all these passages, I can't remember which way I came, and it's so dark. Oh, I'm frightened. I wish I'd gone home when Papa told me to.
And she picked up her skirts and ran through the maze of tunnels on and on in the dark, becoming more and more afraid. At last, she saw a glimmer of light and ran towards it. The passage opened into a thick clump of brambles and briars under some tall trees.
I'm out at last. But oh, where am I? I can't see the oak tree, and I can't see the willow by the stream. I think I must be lost. And it's getting darker, and the wind's beginning to blow. And now it's starting to rain. Oh, what's that noise? What's that creaking? And oh, I'm frightened.
As the raindrops got bigger and bigger and splashed through the leaves around her, Primrose huddled under a toadstool and tried not to cry. But it was very difficult with the wind howling in the trees and the branches creaking. It got darker and darker, and soon everything disappeared into the night. Primrose was just trying not to think about weasels when she saw something that made her more frightened than ever.
Oh, there's
something coming through the woods. 5 little flickering lights and 5 strange shapes. And they are all bulgy and they don't seem to have any heads at all. Oh, what are they? I must keep out of sight.
As Primrose wriggled further back into the brambles, she realized that they were going to pass right by her hiding place. The nearer they came, the worse they looked. She shut her eyes and listened to their footsteps.
Oh, they're so close now. I mustn't move a whisker. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just one more. Where is it? It's walking with a limp. It's got a tail. And it's wearing Grandpa's trousers. And it is Grandpa! Grandpa!
As each of the figures turned round, she recognized them.
Grandpa! Grandma! Dusty Dogwood! Papa! Mama! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you.
Primrose, you're safe. Thank goodness. Oh, what a relief.
Oh, Primrose, we've been so worried about you. Come here. Oh, my, you're cold and wet. You'd better have my cloak. That's better. That'll keep you snug till we get you home.
The harvest mice said they thought you'd gone to the woods, but it was so wet and dark that we'd almost given up hope of finding you.
I thought I'd have to stay here all night on my own. I was so frightened.
Why did you come to the wood?
I don't know. First I went to the cornfield, then I fell asleep, then I went to tea, and then I found a hole in the brambles and went in it. Then I don't know, I got...
Never mind. You can tell us all about it in the morning. Let's take you home now and change you out of those wet clothes and tuck you up nice and warm in bed.
Yes, come along, everybody. And thank you all for helping to look for Primrose.
Yes, thank you.
Well, it's a good job we found her.
Lucky we went that way.
Fancy going down that old hole.
Primrose was nearly asleep by the time they got home. Lady Woodmouse carried her up to her little room where a bright, friendly fire was burning in the grate, with a clean nightie, warming, ready to put on.
There you are. Now let's take off those wet clothes and get you into this lovely warm nightie and into bed, and I'll get you a nice hot drink.
While Primrose sat up in bed sipping her drink, she looked around the little bedroom at her toys and pictures and the warm, flickering fire, and at her mother, who was hanging up her wet clothes to dry. Then, when she had finished, her mother came over and took the mug and placed it on the bedside table, smoothed the pillows, and gave her a kiss. Primrose nestled down under the warm blankets.
I'll never, ever go out of the field on my own again. I'll never go out anywhere on my own again until I'm older.
And as she fell asleep, her mother gently tucked her into her comfy bed and sang softly.
Ease your whiskers, rest your paws, pies and puddings, fill the stores, sweetly dream the night away, till sunshine brings another day.
Brambly Hedge, Winter Story by Jill Barklem. It was the middle of winter. The sun had just set, and it was very, very cold. An icy wind was blowing from the east, whipping up the dead leaves and sending grey clouds scudding through the darkening sky. It was a wind that promised snow. Deep in the dark roots of Brambly Hedge, tiny lights appeared as lamps were lit in the windows. More lights could be seen leaving the store stump, moving hastily along the hedgerow and disappearing into holes hidden in the twisty roots. The mice had smelled snow in the air and were hurrying home to a nice hot supper by the fire. Mr. Apple, warden of the store stump, was the last to leave for home, and by the time he reached Crabapple Cottage, the first flakes were beginning to fall. He let himself in through the front door.
Is that you, dear?
Yes, and I must say I'm glad to get home. It's just beginning to snow, and it really is very cold out there.
Well, take your coat off. There's a lovely fire blazing up here.
Oh, that looks cosy. And what a delicious smell that is, wafting in from the kitchen. You must have been very busy today.
Yes, I have. With the east wind blowing like that, I thought I should spend the afternoon baking some pies and cakes ready for the cold, cold days to come.
Very sensible, dear. Very sensible indeed.
Now, if you draw the 2 armchairs up to the fire, I'll bring in our supper on a tray.
I can't think of anything nicer.
As the large flakes of snow began to collect on the windowsill outside, Mr. and Mrs. Apple settled down to enjoy a hot, tasty supper. The only sound to be heard was the crackle of the fire in the open hearth. But next door, in the hornbeam tree, it was far from being quiet. There, the Toadflax children were very excited.
Look, it's snowing. It's really snowing. Oh, I've never seen snow before. Have you, Wilfred? No, never. Well, not as thick as this anyway. Clover, Catkin, come and see the snow. Huh. When they come in, we'll take a paw full of snow from the window ledge and throw it at them. Good idea. Come on, Catkin. Come on, Clover, over here. Come and look.
No, children. Wilfred, Teazel, put that snow down and please shut the window. You're letting in all the cold air. Supper's ready, so come and sit down.
Oh, good. I'm hungry. Hot chestnut soup.
Oh, that's my favourite. And mine. And mine.
After supper, the children were sent off to bed, but they were far too excited to sleep. As soon as the grown-ups were safely occupied downstairs, they climbed out of their bunk beds to watch the snowflakes falling past the window.
Don't they sparkle?
They're so big. The snow's getting deeper and deeper.
Tobogganing tomorrow? Snow pancakes for tea. We can make huge snow mouse.
And I'll knock it down.
No, you won't. I bet he does. We'll make it so big that he won't be able to. And then we can...
But at last, they became tired of teasing and playing, clambered into their bunk beds, and fell asleep. Next morning, the mice along the hedgerow woke to find their windows half blocked with snow. Mrs. Apple had to stand on tiptoe on the kitchen table to see out.
Oh, what a sight! I've never seen such deep snow. It looks like a thick white blanket, and all the paths and plants have quite disappeared under it. Oh, well, I never.
Next door, the Toadflax family went down to breakfast and found the kitchen dark and still. Mrs. Toadflax took charge immediately.
Wilfred, bring up some wood for the fire. Catkin, you start cutting the bread. Teazel, get the butter. As soon as Wilfred has got the wood, I'll light the fire, and you, Clover, can get to work with a toasting fork. Teazel, fetch the blackberry leaf tea, and Wilfred, when you've finished there, dear...
Soon they were all sitting round the table, eating hot buttered toast, drinking blackberry tea, and making plans for the day ahead. The snow was thicker than the mice had expected. All the downstairs windows along the hedgerow were covered with snow, and many of the upper ones too were hidden in deep drifts. The mice leaned out of their bedroom windows to wave and call to their friends.
Mr. Apple!
Hello there, young mouse.
How deep is it, do you think?
Very deep, Wilfred.
Hello, Mrs. Apple. Hello, Teazel. Is your mother there?
Yes. Mom! Mrs. Apple wants you!
Oh, hello, Mrs. Apple. I think I know what you're going to say. Mr. Toadflax said the same thing just now. Enough snow for a snowball, wouldn't you say? Oh, yes. That's just what I was going to say. Enough for a snowball.
Hooray! Snowball?
Every family along the hedgerow kept shovels, maps and ropes in a special cupboard by the front door. And after breakfast, the mice dug tunnels through the deep snow, linking them all to the store stump. Teazel and Wilfred were sent down to help, but they soon found out that it was much more fun to throw snow at each other, and so they were sent home again. Lord Woodmouse dug his way through to where old Mrs. Eyebright lived.
Mrs. Eyebright? Mrs. Eyebright? It's me, Lord Woodmouse. Are you all right in there?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Couldn't get out, of course, so I'm very pleased to see you. And do you know, I haven't seen snow like this since I was a young mouse. Oh, a long time ago. Such a long time. The last snowball was held that year. It was the year that Mr. Eyebright and I were married. I expect I'm the only one left who can remember it now.
Well, some of us were wondering if the snow is deep enough for us to hold a snowball this year, Mrs. Eyebright.
Oh,
in fact, there is a meeting at the store stump very shortly to discuss the matter. I do hope you can come along. We may need your advice.
Oh, I'd be only too pleased. Only too pleased. Now that you've made a tunnel, I would love to come along. Oh, I'd love to. Yes, it was a long time ago when we had the last snowball.
Soon the store stump began to fill up with the mice from Brambly Hedge. There was an air of excitement as they helped themselves to the seed cake that Mrs. Apple had taken along, and they washed it down with steaming hot acorn coffee. After a while, Mr. Apple went up the small staircase which led to a low landing overlooking the hall. He held up a paw for silence, straightened his whiskers, and looked at the young mice in a kindly but meaningful way.
Thank you. Lord Woodmouse and I have agreed that we should follow in the tradition of our forefathers.
What's a forefather?
We don't know.
How can you have forefathers? Shush, dear.
When the snows are lying deep, when the fields have gone to sleep, when the blackthorn turns to white, and frosty stars bejewel the night, when summer streams are turned to ice, a snowball warms the hearts of mice. Friends, I declare that a snowball will take place at dusk tonight in the ice hall.
There's the ice hall.
Well, very clever. You come along home with me and help prepare the feast.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Apple. I didn't know there would be a feast.
After the meeting, all the mice went out to the branch of the tunnel which led to a deep drift of snow banked against the store stump. There, the eldest mice held a discussion.
I think this will be just right. What do you think, Mrs. Eyebright?
Perfect. The drift we used for the last snowball was just like this.
I'll check the first tunnel to make sure that the snow is firm enough, and then we'll build supports for the roof as we go along. Right you are, Mr. Apple. Call back to us when you get to the middle and tell us what you think.
After a while, they heard Mr. Apple from deep inside.
It's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
The mice picked up their shovels and the digging began. As the snow was cleared from inside the drift, it was piled into carts and taken down to the stream. The middle of the drift was carefully hollowed out, and slowly but surely the space inside was transformed into a grand hall. With the help of ladders and scaffolding, the mice made it bigger and bigger, until Lord Woodmouse called out,
Stop, everybody! I think that's big enough. What do you think, Mrs. Eyebright?
Oh, yes, quite big enough. It's even bigger than the one we had when I was a young mouse. Oh, yes. Oh, it's quite big enough.
Right, then I'll climb up onto the top scaffold and inspect the roof for the last time to make absolutely sure it's safe.
All the mice of Brambly Hedge stood looking up as Mr. Apple carefully climbed up the ladders and scaffolding until he finally stood at the very top and pushed and prodded at the snow. Eventually he was satisfied.
It's as safe as the store stump itself.
Soon, all the kitchens along Brambly Hedge were warm and busy. Hot soups, punches and puddings bubbled over the fire, and in the ovens pies browned and sizzled. But the busiest place of all was Crabapple Cottage. A huge bowl of punch was steaming on the hearth, and the dresser and wooden table were both laden with pies and puddings, cakes and pastries. Mrs. Apple was being helped by the Toadflax children. Well, being helped may not be the best way of putting it.
Now, Clover, Catkin, you thread the string through the crab apples I've hollowed out, and then we'll roast them over the fire.
Like this, Mrs. Apple?
Yes, that's right. Well done.
Why won't you let us help, Mrs. Apple?
Oh, I'm sorry, Wilfred, but you and Teazel always eat so many when you help. It's not that I mind, dears, but we must have some left for the punch.
Is this all right, Mrs. Apple?
Yes, that's perfect. Now bring them over to the fire. Wilfred, Teazel, you two sit there quietly and watch.
Oh, Mrs. Apple.
All the afternoon, the new ice hall was a hive of activity. From the ice brought up from the stream, the mice carved columns, staircases and balconies, which sparkled like diamonds in the blue-green light, and the polished dance floor shone. The glowworms were put in charge of the lighting. Toadflax fetched them early from the bank at the edge of the hedge, for Mrs. Apple had insisted that they should have a good supper before their long night's work began. Tables were set at the end of the hall, and eager cooks bustled in from their kitchens with baskets of food. Basil, the keeper of the hedgerow wines, was in charge of the seating and the musicians.
Wilfred, Teazel, Catkin, Clover, will you arrange some holly up on the platform? Thank you. Dusty, would you help set out some chairs for the musicians? That's it. Thank you. Wilfred, don't play around, please. Thank you, Conker, that's fine. Now I'm going back to get some of the wine ready, and I leave you to finish here. Wilfred, put the holly on the platform, not down Catkin's neck, there's a good mouse. Dusty, you're in charge while I go, so don't...
When all was done, the mice admired their handiwork and went home to wash and change. A few hours later, the excited mice of Brambly Hedge made their way through the snow tunnels to the great ice hall.
So pretty.
Good evening, Mrs. Apple. How nice to see you.
Good evening, Lord Woodmouse.
Oh, good to see you too. Evening. My word, it's cold outside.
Good evening, Lady Woodmouse. Good evening, Lady Woodmouse.
Where do we leave our muffs and mufflers?
On the table over there. Ah, it's Mrs. Eyebright. How nice to see you.
Oh, I couldn't miss the snowball. I do hope it's as good as the last one. Oh, that was many years ago when I was a young mouse. Did I tell you it was the year that my husband and I...
Slowly, the great ice hall filled up, and the mice, looking splendid in their best winter dresses, stood talking and waiting for the ball to start. Wilfred and Teazel crept under a table to watch it all, and every now and then a little paw appeared, and a cream cake disappeared. When everybody had arrived, Lord Woodmouse called for silence.
Ladies and gentle mice, and young mice, and not so young mice. Basil, are the musicians ready?
Yes, we're ready. Aren't we, fellow musicians?
Yes, we're ready.
Then I declare that the snowball shall begin. Let the music play.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The dances were very fast and twirly, and were made even faster by the slippery ice floor. Wilfred and Teazel whirled their sisters round so quickly that their paws left the ground. Clover started to look rather green.
Oh dear, I don't feel very well.
But just at that moment, Mrs. Apple stood on a chair and banged 2 saucepan lids together.
Supper is served.
The eating and drinking and dancing carried on late into the night. At midnight, all the hedgerow children were taken home to bed. As soon as they were safely tucked up, their parents returned to the ball. Basil made some hot blackberry punch, and the dancing got faster and faster. Snowball went on until dawn. Then, as the musicians became tired, the music stopped. The ice columns began to drip. The sleepy mice could dance no more.
Oh, what a lovely snowball. Everything was perfect. Do you know, I do believe it was even better than the last one. But that was a long time ago, when I was just a young mouse. In fact, the year that I...
The tired mice wandered home through the snow tunnels, climbed the stairs, and crept into their warm beds. Outside the windows, the snow had started to fall again. But every mouse in Brambly Hedge was fast asleep.